Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride. Let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/181. And you can email the show pedalshift@pedalshift.net or call the voicemail hotline at 202-930-1109 and check Pedalshift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 181st edition of the Pedalshift Project. My name is Tim Mooney, and I'm super stoked to have you here. We are covering today on this episode transitioning into fall riding. I have been lucky enough to be able to get out, not on super long rides, but on a lot of rides that I'm starting to feel the change of season. And I thought it would be a good time to chat about some of the things that I have in mind as we're transitioning away from the summer and into autumnal riding. Now, I know my Aussie folks, you are doing the exact opposite. So I apologize that this is seasonally off base for you. And indeed, anybody in the Southern Hemisphere. I'm sorry, I'm super Northern Hemisphere centric around here, but go back to a past episode and I'm sure I do something about spring riding for you all. So I hope you enjoyed that. But we're going to be talking about fall riding, maybe somewhat relevant for you, except for the whole falling leaves thing. In any event, I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping here before we get too much further. Pedalshift Live is coming in December, and I wanted to try to maximize the amount of folks who could participate again. And in the past, I've done a little bit of a, a poll or you telling me through votes, voting. You can tell my brain is not exactly cogent right now. Anyways, what I want to know is what works best for you. I've got it narrowed down to 2 days. Friday night, December 6th, of course, this is East Coast time, 9 p.m. East Coast time, Eastern time, or Saturday afternoon, December 7th. Either of those two would be good for me. I'd like to know if it's good for you. I've got a poll up in Facebook. You can go check that out or go to pedalshift.net/live. I've got a little, a Google form or something like that you can just click through and vote there. Or shoot me a note, pedalshift@pedalshift.net, or call the voicemail hotline, whatever works for you. Let me know, vote for it. And I'll announce in the next couple of weeks what the date is. It'll be sort of, I'm not quite sure what the topic's going to be, but you know how we get in December, it's all end of the year-y and all that other kind of stuff. We might do something more fun for that one. So check that out. It'll be either December 6th or December 7th. As with all live shows, those get recorded and will be available in a later week. I think if I'm looking at the calendar right, that will be coming out the following Thursday if you can't make it live. But you should make it live because it's fun. We interact, we chat. I attempt to drink beer but can't because I talk a lot. So we'll figure it all out. Pedalshift.net/live. One other bit of housekeeping for programming is the annual Thanksgiving show this year falls on actual American Thanksgiving. Sorry, Canada. American Thanksgiving this year, that Thursday. And I wanted to refresh my theme of thanks bicycle touring for this year. And I want to get everyone involved in all of this. What are you thankful about in the realm of bike touring? It would be awesome if you called the Pedalshift voicemail hotline, and that's, again, 202-930-1109, and add your voice to things. What is it that you're thankful about in the bike touring realm? Is it because of fitness? Is it an adventure? Is it, palling around with other bike tourists? Is it connecting? What is it about bike touring that you're thankful about? Because what I'd like to do is I'd like to collect a bunch of folks in the Pedalshift community and just slap them all up in addition to my thoughts on what I'm thankful for in bike touring, because I think it's always evolving, and I just would like to do an update on that. So take a minute, tell everybody what you're thankful for in terms of bicycle touring. I'll repeat this for the next several weeks through October. Canadian folks, you can do it in advance of your Thanksgiving, because that's coming up, I think, soonish? Or did we already miss it? I'm sorry, Canada. I really should be better about this in your Thanksgiving. I've enjoyed, as many folks remember, Fine Canadian Thanksgiving when I was on tour in California that one time, and it was super fun. So I am a big fan of all Thanksgivings, but I am going to be celebrating American Thanksgiving on this show. So call the voicemail hotline, 202-930-1109, and just briefly say what you're thankful about for bike touring. If you're not into the voicemail-y thing, you of course can email or hit me up on social media. Just let me know what you think and we'll get it all on the show. All right, on this episode of the Pedalshift Project, we're going to talk a little bit about transitioning into fall riding. So for many of you right now listening, the weather is starting to change a little bit. Now, it might be a little bit more drastic than others, depending on where you're at, but fall riding is often a real big shift away from the summer riding that we've been having. And I wanted to talk about some of my thoughts on all of that. Because it is different, you do want to handle things a little bit differently. So let's chat a little bit about that. First thing is, with any change of season, I think it's an excellent time to give your bike a once-over, particularly if you've been riding a ton this summer. Whether you've been commuting a lot to work, or you've been touring a lot, or you've otherwise been a weekend warrior, whatever it is, give your bike a bit of a once-over, because bikes at this stage of the season, if they're anything like mine, have been hammered around a lot since the last time they've been in the shop. So for one thing that I've noticed with my touring bike, as I've been riding it around quite a bit lately, I've noticed that I think I'm getting a little slippage in the chain here and there. I don't know if any of you get this, but when you're really pressing into things, maybe you come to a full stop. I'm talking about when I'm riding in the city and I'm in a higher gear and I'm maybe getting up out of the saddle to get going because it's a higher gear. So I need to press down on it harder to get going. I've noticed that I will slip a little bit in the gears there. That could be a variety of different things. It could be, just shift down, you dummy. And it won't do that. Or it could be that I need to replace the chain or perhaps even the whole drivetrain. Sometimes those things go hand in hand. So give things a look. It might also mean that I just need to lube the damn chain because you know what? I am terrible at lubing my chain. Speaking of that, some of you, not all of you, but some of you, because I don't want to say there's controversy here. There are some folks that say you go with one lube and you stick with it. In fact, I think I've given that advice on this show. But for some of you, because weather conditions change so much between summer and winter or summer and fall, you will consider doing a different type of lubrication for your chain just because maybe you're getting a ton more wet weather or nasty weather or anything that would make you want to consider going from maybe a more liquidy kind of lube to a more waxy style of lube. As I mentioned, there are some folks that suggest that you should go with one and stick with it because when you change different styles, it actually ends up being worse. I don't know necessarily where I subscribe on that, but I tend to listen to folks who speak authoritatively and stuff like that. So, grain of salt with all that. But if that's something that you normally do, consider making that switch on the now side of things. Because if it's anything like around, say, here in DC, we've had an incredibly dry run of weather, which has been fantastic for the C&O riding, contrasting with last year when it was a freaking swamp out there and I never got out at all. I've been on the C&O quite a bit lately. Now, what's been great about that is it's been so dry that conditions it's not very muddy on my bike, but I have a lot of caked on dust and things like that. So I think what I need to do is take a look at my chain and consider whether or not it's a good time to replace it, as I've talked about, or maybe consider going to a different type of lube. Like I said, I'm really kind of bad at that. I tend to just go ride, and if things kind of feel a little awry, then I'll add some lubrication to it. I know a lot of folks who listen to the show are much better at lubing the chain than I and have much better regimens about what type of lube to use when, seasonally or not. Consider making that change if it's that time of year. For you, I may be doing that. One thing that I've noticed with my riding, especially with my overnights that I've been doing, is, man, my need for carrying water is so much lower than during the summer. And it sort of makes sense. I'm not riding in conditions where it's in the 90 degrees Fahrenheit and above like I did so much during the summer. When that's happening, I'm carrying often 3 liters plus of water in addition to my water bottles, just because I'll need it and I use it throughout the day, and I like to be self-sufficient and carry that much water. I don't need to, because there's places to fill up often on the C&O and other places I go. But, when it's that hot, it is kind of nice to have that peace of mind that I'm carrying that much. I'll tell you what, though. Now that I'm cycling in temperatures that are closer to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, or in the 60s or maybe the 70s at the hottest, things are a lot different, and I don't need to carry as much. So I can carry other things. What I'm finding is that I carry more gear that's like clothing or sleeping bags or things like that, more layers essentially. So it's all trade-off. I've got less weight from water, but I'm often carrying more weight in terms of, pugs. That'll be a future episode you're going to be hearing in a few weeks. So figure out what those trade-offs mean, and whether it just means, okay, great, you're going a little bit lighter, or maybe perhaps it means that you're able to handle carrying that extra bit of warm weather gear, or I should say cold weather gear, things to keep you warmer. But it also might mean that you can leave one of your dry bags at home, for instance, because maybe you don't need to fill stuff up as much. It's just kind of one of those things that as you change seasons, your packing's going to be different, your gear is going to be different, and all of that is trade-offs from things that you had to do during other times. So because my water capacity needs are way lower, I'm carrying a whole lot less weight. And that means I can carry other things that are more important for me as the temperatures start to dip. Speaking of that, I really, really recommend, and this is what your mom always told you, or your whomever was your mother figure in your life, or at least similar to my mother figure, always dress in layers. I have found that the best pieces of gear that I've got for this time of year are usually either down-filled or wool. I have a really, really favorite merino wool sweater that I just am constantly bringing along. It is a great layer. It's a great outer layer when things aren't terribly cold. Like today, I think we're hitting into the low 70s here. It's great for throwing on at the end of a day when I get into camp, as after I kind of cool down a little bit after I hop off of the bike. It's one of those types of layers that's also great because, you don't mind if it gets a little bit wet. If it does start to sprinkle on you, or you do get caught into something, wool, of course, will keep you warm, whereas cotton, as they say, cotton kills. If that gets wet, not so good, not so great. You don't want to be wearing layers like that. Another thing that I really have enjoyed a lot, and I've been wearing even when I haven't kind of needed it so much because I just like bringing it along, is the down-filled vest that I have. I've talked about this, I think most notably this year when I was out on the big long ride between DC and Cincinnati. It was a super helpful piece of gear right there because, boy, it keeps your core warm. And at the same time, if things start to warm up, you're not completely covered up and sealed in like with a full down jacket. It's also less bulky. It really packs down small and is just a super, super great additional layer for going out in the fall season because it's perfect for those transitional times. And that's the big thing that we're going to run into in the fall is you'll end up starting a day maybe as low as in the 40s Fahrenheit. You're not quite, certainly not freezing, but definitely chilly, where you're going to need your hat and you're going to perhaps even need gloves as you get started. But maybe as you get rolling later on in the day, you could be getting up into some relatively warm temperatures, not summer temperatures, but warm enough that you're going to want to peel off things. So layers are the way to go. It makes it easier for you to transition between the cool and the warm. And of course, as we ride, we're going to generate heat. And, that cool start will quickly warm up. And if you're really, really wearing bulky stuff, you're going to end up regretting that because it's harder to get out of the bulky stuff. If you go with the layers, you can really manage those temperatures a lot better. I feel like that's kind of one of those common sense things that we learn when we're kids, especially if we live in these transitional climates like I grew up in, but layers so the way to go. One other thing that's this is the bummer about going into fall is you're starting to lose the light so much earlier. I mean, one of the things that I've been noticing is I've been getting up earlier and starting my workday earlier than I normally have been. But I'm also, kind of working through the day, and I'm noticing it gets dark so much earlier than it was in the middle of the summer. I mean, that's just what happens when we get into fall. But I'm seeing that I'm starting my day in the dark and I'm ending my day still in the light for the moment, but it's getting to the point where, I'm going to start needing to worry about having lights on my bike a lot more often. I've gotten in the habit, even though I haven't had to use them a whole heck of a lot here in town, I'm carrying them with me full time now. I don't know about you, but during the summer, often I'm not out with my bike past dark because it's light so late that it's infrequent that I'm out with my bike way past dark. And if I am, or if I'm doing some kind of an event or I'm going out or whatever, and I'm riding my bike, well, then I'll bring the lights. I'll specifically bring the lights. Now I'm always keeping the lights inside of the frame bag that I've got for my bike. And I think that that's just the nature of the beast these days. We're getting relatively close. I think we're a month away here in the States from doing our incredibly silly, but it's what we do, daylight savings time. Not everybody out there has this, but let me get this right. We fall back an hour. And so what that does is it allows us to have a little more daylight at the beginning of the day, but boy, we get to pitch black like in the 5 o'clock hour, shortly after that. So I know that if I'm out and about, and, it's at the end of a work day, kind of a traditional work day, that means that I'm going to be coming back in the dark. And that means I need to have my lights. That is also going to be true if I'm going to be out on maybe a bike overnight or even a long weekend where I'm out on the bike in these late fall days. And I'm intending to get out at least on a few more overnights before things get a little too cold. And I know I'm going to probably be cycling in the dark on the evening side of things. So make sure you're checking your lights, and make sure, if you haven't been using them, make sure they've got good batteries, or if they're rechargeable, make sure they've got a good charge in them, because this is the time of year when we're going to be relying on them a whole heck of a lot. I'm a big fan. I've been asked what my favorite lights are, and my front light choice has changed. I used to have a really, really beefy halogen light. Now, halogen lights are just so energy inefficient, and eventually it kind of died on me. So what I've been using are these cheap rechargeable USB lights that I got out of Amazon. They're LED lights. They're not great for the, there's two types of front lights, the lights that help you see or lights that help you be seen. These are much more on the be seen side of things, but they do shine enough that I can see somewhat. Not so much that it's helpful on a pitch black C&O, as I found. So I may be in the market for more of a headlight type of option, since I don't have that anymore. So I'm going to be checking that out. But in the interim, it's just these, relatively inexpensive $10 USB rechargeable be seen headlights that are ubiquitous, and they're so cheap that, you can get multiple ones if you want. The rear light that I've used for years, I'm a huge fan of. I think it's Portland Design Works, and I don't remember which model it is, but it's got a great strobe effect on the back. It can do a solid one if you want. I know there's a lot of points of view as to whether or not you want to use strobes or not. I don't like using strobes on my front lights. I think that there's apparently some studies out there that suggest that they're not really helpful in terms of depth perception for folks that are looking at them. So somebody who's in a vehicle is not going to be able to tell how far away a blinking light is compared to a solid light. So I tend to go solid for my front lights. The rear lights, I do use the blinker because I think that it just is a good way of getting attention in a way that I don't think a solid red light does. The Portland Design Works lights are excellent. I've used them for years. I've got a couple of them, and I'll just sort of cycle through them. These ones are battery powered, if memory serves. Not sure if I have an opinion as to whether or not USB rechargeable is better than battery. I think I see both sides. I think this is one of those debates that Folks that feel strongly one way or the other. I don't think I feel strongly. I've got both, and I think that they work pretty well both ways. So use whatever makes sense for you is what I would say. But definitely, it's fall. Start rocking your lights. Last but not least, and this is going to be a little bit more location dependent, but I will say I think that everybody kind of figures this out sooner rather than later, and often the hard way. Wet leaves are worse than ice. The time of year when leaves are just starting to fall, and then you grab some rain on top of it, and then the leaves start to decay just a slight amount. Man, that is I think, least safe time in terms of traction for cycling. So if you're going to be, especially on roads, so you mix road goo, whether that's dust and oil and all sorts of other things, with wet leaves, I think that that's some of the worst surface to be on. So be mindful of your speed, be mindful of how you're taking your turns. You're just not going to have the good grip on the pavement that you've had in the past. If you're on tour, whether you're on road or you're on any kind of trail, be real mindful that leaves are real rough. One other thing that I'll mention, and this is particularly true for resurfaced trails, there are sections of the C&O that have been resurfaced last year and this year. And one of the elements of that is the trail is now kind of thick and has an edge to it. And when leaves fall on the side, you're not going to know where that edge is too well. And that can be really dangerous if you're especially going around somebody maybe on the right and you don't know where the edge is. You want to be real careful about that. So I won't say stay in the middle of a trail when you're in that condition, but I would say ease more towards the center when there's nobody coming, when nobody's passing you, or you're not trying to, or you've got nobody on the other side that you're coming towards. But be real mindful of the fact that that edge may not be visible to you, and catching the edge can be really dangerous. This can also be true on roads if you're in a really heavily treed area. You've got gutters, you've got sidewalks, you've got all sorts of things where you're not going to be able to tell where pavement begins and ends, or where maybe it's potholes, but I was thinking covers, manhole covers, things like that. Stuff that I tend to want to go around when I'm riding, just to keep the surface type similar underneath my tires. Sometimes you can't see that, and talk about the worst surface. Wet leaves on top of one of those metal manhole covers. Holy moly! I've bitten the dust a couple of times on stuff like that. Last fall, I was in Seattle, if memory serves. I think it was last fall, maybe last December. I don't even remember where it was, but I took a nasty spill because it was wet. I don't know if there were leaves on the ground, but it was next to, or it was going over a set of light rail tracks. And that's another type of thing that once that gets wet, oh man, you catch rail tracks wrong. I know a lot of you have done this too. It doesn't matter if you get your wheel inside of that, divot there, or that spacer in there, that void. Boy, you can catch your rubber on the wet rail itself, and man, you can go flying. So wet leaves, wet everything. Be real mindful. Watch your speed. Watch how you're turning. Go parallel on those tracks. Defensive riding at all times, I think, is a really important thing come fall, because you know what? During summer, you get a little complacent because these things aren't quite exactly the same. It's not that things don't get wet during the summer, but I don't know, you see things a lot better. I don't have as much stuff in the way. Lighting is better. Now it's going to be darker. It's going to have stuff on the ground. We get a little bit more rain, especially cold rain during the fall here in the DC area. Be careful while you're out there. So let's go back and sum it all up, transitioning into your fall riding. Make sure you give your bike a once-over, just to see if anything needs some attention. Consider a new chain lube for different weather conditions, if that's the kind of thing that you normally do. This is the time of year that folks will often make that change. If your water capacity is, and the needs for carrying that much water are lower, like mine, you've got room for other things. So rethinking what you're packing in particular is something that's going to be going on during the fall, because you're going to need more warm layers. And oh, by the way, Wear layers. Make sure that you've got the right gear for the right conditions. Things are going to be cooler, so make sure you've got warmer gear to keep you comfortable. It's going to be darker, so make sure you bring your lights front and back. I think that those are really important for safety and to be able to see. And last but not least, watch out for those conditions. Wet leaves are like ice during the fall. Trust me, personal experience on that. And as always, we like to close out the show with a special shout out to the Pedalshift Society. Because of support from listeners like you, Pedalshift is a weekly bicycle touring podcast with a global community, expanding into live shows, meetups, tour journals, you name it. If you like what you hear, you can support the show for $5, $2, or even $1 a month. And there's one-shot and annual options if you're not into the whole small monthly thing. Check it all out at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lean, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittis, Thomas Skadow, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Harry Telgadis, Chris Barron, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Stuart Buchan, Mr. T, Roxy Arning, Nathan Poulton, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Paul Culbertson, Scott Culbertson, Cody Forchinger, Tom Beninati, Greg Braithwaite, Sandy Pizzio, Jeff Mustard, Seth Pollock, Joseph Quinn, Drew Porter, Byron Patterson, Joachim Robert, Ray Jackson, Jeff Fry, Kenny Mikey, Lisa Hart, John Denkler, Steve Hankel, Miguel Quinones, Alejandro Aviles Reyes, Keith Spangler, Greg Towner, Dan Gebhardt, Jody Zeranin, Lucas Barwick, Michael Baker, Brian Bechtal, Reinhard Biggle, Greg Middlemiss, Connie Moore, William Gothman, Brian Benton, Joan Churchill, Mike Bender, Rick Weinberg, Billy Crafton, Gary Matushak, Greg Latoile Lopez, James Sloan, Jonathan Dillard, John Funk, Tom Bilch, Ronald Paroli, Dave Roll, Brian Hafner, Misha LeBlanc, Ari Messinger, and David Grotke. And thanks also to all past and anonymous donors for helping make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.